A millionaire single dad sat frozen in the corner of a quiet diner watching the woman who brought his silent, wheelchair-bound son to life with nothing but a gentle smile and a quiet dance. She didn't know he was watching. She didn't know that moment would change everything, but he did. And from that instant, her world and his would never be the same. That afternoon, the diner was quiet, filled with golden light streaming through the tall windows along the front wall. Dust floated gently in the still air as the warm scent of fresh-baked bread and coffee wafted through the room. Outside, the world moved at a slow pace. A dog napped on the sidewalk, the wind rustled through the trees, and cars passed by occasionally. But nothing hurried, nothing noisy. Inside, Ellie wiped down the counter that she'd already cleaned twice. No new orders came in. No customers needed attention, except for one. She glanced over to the far corner by the window and smiled softly. Max was there, 8 years old, with wide, serious eyes. He sat in his wheelchair with a sketchbook on his lap and a colored pencil in his hand. His dad, Logan, had stepped out to take a phone call, leaving Max alone with his drawings. He always drew trees, tall ones, bent ones, sometimes with birds, and sometimes just empty branches. Ellie quietly approached, bending down beside him so their eyes were level. "Hey, Max," she said gently, tilting her head toward him. "How's your masterpiece coming along today?" Max looked up and gave her a faint smile. "It's a pine tree this time," he said, "like the ones along our drive." "That's beautiful," Ellie said, nodding in admiration. "You've got a real artist's eye. You know that." He shrugged modestly, but his smile lingered. Then Ellie's voice softened even more. "How about we try something today? Just a small step." Max blinked. "What do you mean?" She looked around the empty diner, then back at him with a playful glint in her eyes. "Only it's just you and me. One step. Let's see how far we can go together." Max looked down at his legs, his hands slightly curled. "I haven't stood in so long." "I know," she said, "but I'll be right here. We'll go slow, like a game. Do you trust me?" He looked into her eyes, seeing the certainty there. Anne nodded. Ellie stood up and gently moved his sketchbook aside. She stood next to him, holding out both hands. "Okay, buddy." Ready, Max took a deep breath, his small hands gripping hers. With precision and care, Ellie braced one foot behind her and gently pulled, encouraging Max to lean forward. His arms trembled, and his legs barely moved. But slowly, shakily, he pushed down and began to stand. His knees wobbled. Ellie steadied him. "You're doing great. Just breathe." Max's legs were stiff and reluctant, but he stood tall, swaying a bit, marking his first time up in nearly 2 years. His eyes widened. "I'm up." "Yes, you are." Ellie beamed, holding his hands tight. "Look at you, Max." He teetered, then wobbled, and Ellie caught him under the arms just before he lost balance. But he was standing. "Want to take a step?" she whispered. Max nodded, his jaw clenched in focus. Ellie stepped back a little, leading with her right foot, then her left, slow and unsteady. "1," she counted softly. "2." They both laughed, shaky and breathless, as Ellie stepped back and Max followed. He was clumsy, but moving. "You'll dance with me." Ellie grinned. "Look, you're going." Max laughed, a free, joyful sound. Ellie spun on her toes in delight, then reached out for him, letting him lean on her. She took both his hands, and together they danced a few more steps across the empty diner. Her whispered encouragements and his giggles filled the air like music. The door opened. Logan walked in mid-phone call. He froze, phone dropping to his side. In the middle of the diner, his son, who hadn't walked in nearly 2 years, stood straight, clinging to the hands of a young waitress, taking steps across the floor. Logan couldn't breathe. His throat tightened, heart pounding. He stared, motionless, watching Max shuffle forward with pure joy on his face. Ellie looked up and saw Logan. She stopped, letting Max lean on her, and whispered, "Your dad's here." Max turned and smiled. "Dad, look, I'm walking." Logan moved forward slowly, eyes wide, emotions surging in waves. He knelt on one knee, arms open wide. Max let go of Ellie and took 2 wobbly steps before falling into his father's arms. Logan held him tight, tears streaming down his cheeks unchecked. Max buried his face in his dad's shoulder, giggling between breaths. Ellie stood nearby, hand over her mouth, eyes shining with pride. For a long moment, no one said anything. Shoulder, giggling between. Then Logan looked up at her, his voice thick. "How did you do that?" How Ellie shook her head, a tear rolling down her cheek. "It wasn't me. He did it." The world outside kept going. Cars drove by. Wind blew through the pines. But inside that little diner, something had changed forever, and nothing would ever be the same. The next morning, the diner was quieter than usual. The usual clinks of dishes and soft conversations seemed hushed by the presence of something unspoken. Logan sat alone at his corner table, a hot coffee untouched in front of him. His eyes weren't on the menu or the window. They were on Ellie. She moved between the tables with her usual grace. But now Logan saw it differently, not as routine or duty, but as purpose. There was something behind her smile, something that lingered longer than politeness and ran deeper than habit. When she finally approached his table, he stood, not sure why. "Can we talk?" he asked. Ellie nodded, surprised but not wary. "Sure," she said. "Want to step outside?" The alley behind the diner wasn't fancy, but it was quiet. A lone wooden chair sat under a rusty tin awning, with hints of bread and lavender from the herb garden Ellie had planted in cracked pots. They sat down. Logan broke the silence first. "I need to know what you did for Max yesterday." Why, Ellie looked down at her hands, fingers fidgeting in her apron. She took a deep breath. "Because someone once believed I could dance too." He frowned, confused. "Dance?" She nodded slowly. "I used to be a dancer. Ballet, modern, even a bit of ballroom. I toured with a small company right after high school. It was everything to me." Logan listened intently, surprised by the lightness in her voice. "I'd just landed a solo in a big show. My first real role. 2 weeks before opening night, I was in a car accident. Not a bad one, but enough to break my hip and tear ligaments. Surgery was risky. Recovery was long. My insurance, well, let's say it didn't cover the dreams part of getting better." Her voice didn't break, but her words slowed. "I lost it all. My spot in the company, the scholarship I was supposed to get that fall, the dance studio I trained at hired someone else, and my parents. They didn't know how to handle a daughter who couldn't do what she was born to do." Logan stayed quiet. He didn't need to speak. "I took odd jobs, tried to pay the medical bills, and ended up waitressing here, telling myself it was temporary. But the truth is, I got stuck. Finally." Ellie turned to him, her eyes fragile but steady. "The first time I saw Max, I recognized that look, that quiet sadness. And I guess it was mine too. I'd been through it. I know what it's like to want to move but feel like the world has glued your feet to the floor." Logan stared at her, his throat tight. "You saw yourself in him." "I still do." A pause hung between them, heavy with unspoken connection. "I guess I was just being too pushy, maybe too kind." "I don't think so." "I know," Ellie said gently. "Most people don't. They see the apron and the coffee pot and think that's all there is. But it's not." "No," she said softly. "It's not." The wind stirred the leaves in the pots, rustling the lavender and thyme. Ellie gazed up at the sky. "There were times I thought about giving up when I could barely afford groceries. The pain wouldn't stop. I couldn't dance. And I couldn't breathe without remembering who I used to be." She turned back to him, her voice trembling for the first time. "But then Max came along, week after week. He smiled at me like I mattered. He didn't know my story. But somehow he helped me find a new one." Logan couldn't speak. He just looked at her, the woman who had lifted his son with faith and patience, and in doing so, given him something to hold on to again. "You saved him," he finally said. Ellie shook her head. "No, he saved me." And in that quiet moment, something shifted, not just in how Logan saw Ellie, but in how he saw his own life, the way he wore his pain like armor, the way he kept the world at a distance. Now, a limping waitress with a story had cracked that armor open with kindness and the courage to dance again, one step at a time. The sun was just rising, casting soft golden rays over the rooftops as Logan pulled into the diner's parking lot. Diner. Now it had become a ritual. Early mornings, the quiet booths, Max's sketchbook on the table, and Ellie moving between the customers as if she were made of sunlight and music. But Logan didn't come just out of habit or even for the sketches anymore. He came for her. Logan Evans was what most people called successful, CEO of a booming tech company with a net worth in the millions, a name that turned heads in any boardroom, but no one ever called him warm, joyful, or whole, not since his wife passed. It had been 2 years, but the pain lingered. They just learned to hide it better. He buried himself in work, in planning treatments for Max, in controlling everything he could, because what he couldn't control had taken everything. But all his influence and money couldn't change what he thought was permanent. Max would never walk again until Ellie showed up. At first, he brushed her off, just another overly cheerful waitress. Then he saw the light in Max's eyes when she entered the room. His gaze followed her every move, like watching her ease the pain a little. And now, every time Logan sat with his son and watched Ellie kneel beside Max's wheelchair, coaxing him to stretch, guiding him into a new pose, encouraging him to stand one more second, he saw a hope he'd long given up on. In the weeks that followed, things started to change. Max smiled more. He asked to go to the diner, even on days when Logan was too tired to argue. He began humming the songs Ellie played on the radio while she worked. And then, one afternoon, Logan walked in and saw something that stopped him in his tracks. Ellie was in the middle of the dining room, arms raised high, while Max stood beside her, not holding on, not leaning on anything, just standing. His legs shook, his face focused, but he was upright on his own. It lasted only seconds, but Logan couldn't breathe. Ellie turned and met his eyes, her smile bright and tearful. Max looked over, proud and beaming. "Dad, did you see that?" Logan nodded, swallowing hard. "I saw it. Buddy, I saw it all. That night, after Max had dinner and fallen asleep in the back seat." Logan sat alone in the driver's seat outside their house. The radio was off. Streetlights hummed softly. Logan stared out the windshield, unable to move. Tears were rolling down his cheeks before he even realized it. Thing he'd held onto too tightly for. He wasn't crying. He wasn't breaking. It was quieter than that, just a man letting go of what he'd held onto too tightly for too long. Grief, guilt, fear. It all quietly spilled down his cheeks. For the first time since his wife's funeral, Logan allowed himself to believe in something beyond survival. He believed in possibility. He believed in Max. And maybe, just maybe, he believed he could hope again. He glanced in the rearview mirror, seeing his son curled up peacefully, a soft smile still on his lips. Then he thought of Ellie, her gentle voice, her strong heart, the way she looked at Max, not broken, but braver. And Logan whispered into the silence, "Thank you." He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in years, he wanted to find out. It all started with a simple question, asked with a spark of boldness and hope. One quiet afternoon, when Max was napping in the back after a long play session, Ellie slid into the seat across from Logan and looked him straight in the eye. "Let me work with him every day after school." Logan blinked. "You've done more than enough. I want to do more," she said gently. "I want to try something consistent, focused, not just stretching or standing. I want to help him really move, actually walk." Logan hesitated. His first instinct was to say no, to protect, to control. But then he thought of Max, the way his eyes lit up walking into the diner, the way he laughed with Ellie, the way he stood, and the words caught in his throat. "Okay," he said. Yes. They turned Logan's backyard into a wonderland. It started with a few square feet of cleared, level ground. Ellie brought old yoga mats, garden lights, and a speaker for soft classical music. Logan helped her build a low railing from PVC pipes and wood for Max to hold on to. They marked out the dance floor with chalk. Each line was a goal, a boundary, a step forward. Ellie called them magic paths, and Max loved them. Every afternoon after school and work, They gathered in the backyard. Max wore sneakers instead of his usual braces. Ellie in faded leggings and a tank top with a dancer on the chest. Logan often sat on the porch at first, pretending to read the paper. But his eyes never left them. "Okay," Ellie said. "Today we're waltzing, like a gentleman." Max giggled, "But I don't know how." "You already are," she whispered, gently guiding his foot forward, then to the side. There were days he took one step, then two. There were days Max struggled just to stand. There were days he crossed half the yard, and days he fell into Ellie's arms, laughing, never giving up, struggled to stand. There were days Logan began joining them. At first, not really, but eventually Ellie saw him rolling up his sleeves, raking the grass, quietly clearing space so Max wouldn't trip. Then one day, he took Max's hand, and they stepped 3 times together, father, son, and the woman who was no longer just a waitress. There were moments, brief but bright, when Logan and Ellie caught each other's eyes across the yard, not with flirtation, but understanding. A look that said, "We're building something together." One golden evening, as the sun set and bathed the backyard in bronze and amber, Max sat on the edge of the mat and looked up at his dad. "Dad," he said, "do you think Mom can see me?" Logan stiffened. Ellie did too. He knelt beside his son and nodded slowly. "I think she sees you every day." "Do you think she's proud?" "I think so," Logan whispered, stroking Max's hair. "She's never been prouder." That night, Ellie stayed a little longer. Max had dozed off on the couch after dinner, and Logan walked her to her car. The porch light flickered, casting a warm glow around them. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for giving him back part of his life." Ellie looked at him, her voice soft. "He's giving it back to me too." They stood in silence for a moment, something unspoken between them. Then she left. A few hours later, unable to sleep, Ellie returned. She'd left her phone charger on the porch. She parked quietly, not wanting to wake them. But as she approached the porch, she stopped. The yard was dimly lit by moonlight, and there, in the middle of the chalk lines, Logan stood. He was on his knees, hands clasped in front of him, head bowed. She could hear his voice, soft through the quiet. "Please," he whispered, "please, let him dance once in his life. Not for me, not for her, just for him. He deserves that." Ellie stood still, her heart aching. She'd seen Logan's strength, his anger, his control, but never this. Never a raw, beautiful plea like this. The man, the father, the grief, the hope. She backed away quietly, leaving the prayer hanging in the air because it was sacred. And maybe, just maybe, that prayer was already being answered. The ballroom buzzed with laughter, the clink of champagne glasses, and the smooth jazz melodies floating through the air. Crystal chandeliers sparkled over the crowd of sponsors, executives, and philanthropists, all gathered under the banner of Logan's new initiative, a fund for kids with mobility challenges. The event was grand, the kind people whispered about for weeks beforehand, and everything had to be perfect. Ellie stood backstage behind the velvet curtain, holding Max's small hand. He wore a crisp white button-up shirt tucked into black pants. Shoes shined and tied. She knelt in front of him, gently adjusting his collar. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" she asked, her voice a whisper beneath the music. Max nodded, eyes wide but calm. "I've been practicing every day." Ellie smiled, her heart racing. "Do you remember the steps? 1, 2, hold, turn," he recited. "That's my boy," she whispered. She squeezed his hand and kissed the top of his head. "Let's show them." Across the ballroom, Logan was chatting with a major donor when he glanced toward the stage and saw a movement behind the curtain. His brow furrowed. The performance wasn't scheduled yet, just a short interlude of music. Nothing more. Then the lights dimmed. Silence fell over the room as the MC stepped forward. She knelt down in front of him, gently adjusting his collar. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" she asked, her voice whispering beneath the music. Max nodded, his eyes wide but still calm. "I've been practicing every day." Ellie smiled, her heart pounding. No braces, no wheelchair. His steps were slow, careful, and rhythmic. The crowd held its breath, watching Ellie follow him, step by step, Her hands hovered at his sides, ready in case he stumbled. Logan stepped forward. Panic flashed in his eyes, words catching in his throat. "Ellie, what are you doing?" But then Max turned his head, his eyes finding his dad in the crowd. He smiled. "I wanted to try," he said loudly, clear over the soft music. "For you and for her." Logan's heart clenched. The music swelled. Max took another step, then another. 6 in total. Slow, cautious, but upright. And Max stepped out. Logan froze. When he reached the center of the stage, Ellie stepped beside him, taking his small hand, then gently turning. A spin, a full circle, a dance that wasn't perfect, wasn't smooth, but real, joyful, alive. The audience gasped, then erupted in applause, cheers, and tears. Everyone stood. Phones were raised to capture the moment, but Logan didn't move. He just stood watching, hand on his heart, eyes burning with emotion. Now, Max was laughing, his eyes sparkling under the stage lights. Ellie spun beside him, then knelt, letting him lean on her as they both bowed. The applause thundered. Logan stepped forward slowly, then kept going. When they reached the edge of the stage, Max reached for him. Logan hugged him tight, words choked in his throat. "You did it," he whispered into his son's hair. "You really did." Max grinned wide. "We did it, me and Miss Ellie." Logan looked at Ellie. She stood nearby, wiping tears from her cheeks, her smile soft but radiant. "Thank you," he murmured. She didn't answer with words. She just nodded, because some moments don't need anything else. That night, under the glittering lights of the ballroom, more than a performance happened. A boy danced, a father believed, and a woman who had lost everything helped create something unforgettable. Not for the spotlight, not for the applause, but for love and the music, gentle and enduring, echoed in their hearts. The days after the event were filled with a quiet, lasting wonder. Logan and Ellie started spending more time together, not just for therapy or quiet chats in the diner, but for long evening walks, dinners at Logan's house, and easy laughter. Max was the happiest of all. "Finally, I have someone else to tell stories to at bedtime," he declared one night, proudly pulling Ellie into his room with a stack of books under his arm. Ellie laughed, letting him climb into bed while Logan leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, watching like he was memorizing the moment. "You're better at voices than me," he admitted as Ellie roared like a perfect dragon, making Max squeal with delight. As the weeks passed, they fell into a rhythm. Not perfect, not scripted, but real. Then one morning, a letter arrived for Ellie. She opened it at the kitchen table, her fingers trembling slightly. Max and Logan watched curiously. As she read the words aloud, her voice caught. She'd been accepted into a 1-year certification program to become a licensed dance therapist specializing in kids with mobility issues. The scholarship covered everything: tuition, housing, materials. She looked up, stunned. "Wow." The room went silent for a beat. Then Logan stood, walked over, and hugged her. "You have to go," he said without hesitation. "This is what you're meant for." Her eyes welled up. "But what about Max? What about us?" Logan smiled, gently cupping her face. "We're not going anywhere. You don't have to choose between your dream and us." And just like that, the fear that had been building in her chest since she opened the envelope began to fade. That night, as they lay under the stars in Logan's backyard, with Max asleep inside and the world quiet around them, Ellie turned to Logan. "Are you ever scared?" she asked. "That I'll leave, and this won't last." He was silent for a moment, moonlight catching his jawline. Then he looked at her. "I'd rather love and lose," he said softly. "So don't ever try." She held her breath, because that was Logan. He never said too much, but when he spoke from his heart, it carried the weight of 1,000 silent promises. And right then, Ellie knew he meant it. 2 days later, something unexpected happened. They were in the yard again. Ellie was marking new chalk paths. Logan was setting up the speaker. Max bounced with excitement for their daily routine. But this time, as Ellie turned to start the music, Max suddenly stood up without prompting, without any help. "Wait," he said, eyes wide with an inner fire. "Let me try this." Ellie and Logan both froze. Max took a breath. Then, with no guiding hand, no railing, he stepped forward 1 step, then another, 3 solid steps, then 2 more. On the 6th, he wobbled and fell into Logan's arms, but he was laughing. Breathless. Victory. Ellie covered her mouth, eyes tearing up. Logan held his son tight, tears streaming down his face. "You did it," he whispered. "You really did." Max looked at Ellie, still in shock, and said with a grin, "I wanted to surprise you." She knelt beside him and hugged him tight. The best surprise I've ever had. That moment sealed something. Not just Max's strength, not just Logan's love, but the truth that no matter what came next, the challenges, the changes in Chicago, they weren't just helping each other heal anymore. They were family, and nothing could take that away. The dance studio smelled of fresh paint and lavender-scented floor polish. Sunlight poured in through the high windows, flooding the wooden floor like a golden river. Ribbons hung from the mirrors. Soft music played from an old speaker in the corner, and laughter echoed in every corner. Ellie stood at the center of it all, barefoot in soft leggings and a white blouse, her hair tied back, eyes shining with pride. Around her, kids moved to the rhythm, awkward and joyful, some in braces, others with walkers, some spinning with arms out, others swaying in place. Meant it. 2 days later, something here. It didn't matter. Every kid was a dancer, and Max was right beside her. At 10 years old, he was her unofficial assistant, whispering encouragement to a shy new student, leading warm-ups, even helping pick music for their weekly free dance circle. He wore a whistle around his neck like a coach, but only used it to make the others giggle. "I'm not a real teacher," he'd say. "You're the best one." Ellie always replied, "You know what trying means." After each class, parents gathered at the windows, teary-eyed, watching their kids move in ways doctors said were impossible. Ellie's classes were completely free, fully funded by Logan's foundation, which was growing and thriving. But she never talked about the money. Only about movement, about music, about hope. The wedding was 2 weeks away. Ellie and Logan planned it as simply as possible, a ceremony in the garden behind the studio with string lights, wildflowers, and a dance floor under the stars. He took his role seriously, hand-drawing the invitations, picking songs for the playlist, and writing a speech he kept secret like state-classified info. Only Ellie knew he was nervous about reading it aloud. "You'll be amazing," she told him one night as he practiced whispering to the mirror. "You're already the heart of this family." The night before the wedding, Ellie sat alone in her office, staring at the white dress bag hanging on the wall. She slowly unzipped it, hands shaking a little. Inside was the ballet outfit she'd never worn white tulle, sheer fabric, lace sewn along the neckline. She'd kept it all those years, folded away as part of another life, but now it didn't represent loss anymore. It had become something transformed. On the wedding day, she wore it, not as a performer seeking applause, but as a woman stepping into the life she'd helped choreograph with grace, pain, and purpose. The garden glowed with soft lights. Chairs lined the aisle. Friends, family, and studio students gathered with smiles and tissues. Max stood up front, holding the ring box with a proud grin. Logan watched Ellie walk down the aisle, her dress catching the light as if it had been made for this moment. His eyes never left her. The ceremony was short and sincere. They exchanged vows amid laughter and tears. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the crowd erupted in applause. But before Ellie and Logan could kiss, Max ran up and hugged them both. Then the moment Max had prepared for arrived. "I was gonna say something funny," he began, his voice cracking a little, "but I think this is better." He glanced at Ellie, then Logan, then down at his paper. "I used to think I'd never dance. I used to think dreams were just for kids. But then she came along, and she didn't just show me how to move. She showed me how to smile again." He turned to Logan. He took his role seriously, personally drawing the invitations, picking songs for the playlist, and writing a speech that he kept as secret as a national treasure. Only Ellie knew he was nervous about reading it out loud. You'll be amazing." One night, as he was practicing whispering to the mirror, she told him, "You're already the heart of this family." The night before the wedding, Ellie sat alone in the study, staring at the white garment bag hanging on the wall. She slowly unzipped it, her hands trembling a bit. Inside was the ballet outfit she'd never worn, white tulle, sheer chiffon, and lace sewn along the neckline. She'd kept it all those years, folded away like a piece of another life. But now it no longer symbolized loss. It had become something transformed. On the wedding day, she wore it, not as a performer seeking applause, but as a woman stepping into a life she'd helped choreograph with grace, pain, and purpose. The garden glowed with soft lights. Chairs lined the aisle. Friends, family, and students from the studio gathered with smiles and tissues. Max stood at the front, holding the ring box with a look of pure pride. Logan watched Ellie walk down the aisle, her dress catching the light as if it had been meant for this moment all along. His eyes never left her. The ceremony was short and heartfelt. They exchanged vows amid laughter and tears. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the crowd erupted in applause, and Max was the first to run over and hug them both. Then the moment Max had prepared for arrived. He stepped up to the small podium, cleared his throat, and held up a folded piece of paper. "I was gonna say something funny," he began, his voice cracking a little, "but I think this is better." He glanced at Ellie, then Logan, then down at his paper. "I used to think I'd never dance. I used to think dreams were just for kids. But then she came along, and she didn't just show me how to move, she showed me how to smile again." He turned to Logan, and he didn't just protect me. He believed in me, even when I didn't. He believed in both of us. Max took a breath. "So, I just want to say thank you." He looked at the crowd, then back at his parents. "She taught me to dance, and he taught me to believe." A hush fell for a second, then came a wave of applause, cheers, and tears. Ellie wiped her eyes. Logan reached over and hugged Max tightly. That night, under a sky full of stars, Ellie and Logan danced together for the first time as husband and wife, and Max joined them, gently spinning to his own rhythm, surrounded by friends and family, on the same floor where he'd once taken his first steps. It wasn't a solo. It wasn't a performance. It was their life, and it was beautiful. The field was flooded with the golden light of late afternoon, that kind of light that makes everything look softer, better, like the earth itself is pausing to witness something sacred. Wildflowers swayed in the breeze, and tall grasses sparkled in the setting sun. A simple wooden arch, handmade and draped with linen and vines, stood at the center of it all, in anticipation. No, the guests sat on rows of white chairs set on the ground, their faces lit up with emotion and anticipation. There was no big band, no red carpet, just birds singing, a gentle wind, and the faint melody of an acoustic guitar strumming softly from the edge of the field. Ellie stood at the edge of the aisle, her white ballet dress flowing with every step she took on the grass. She was barefoot, with her natural curls and a wreath of baby's breath woven into her hair. As she walked forward, her eyes never left Logan, who stood under the arch in a gray vest with his sleeves rolled up, his gaze full of affection. Max stood beside him, wearing a tiny bow tie that matched, his hands clasped in front of his chest. As he saw Ellie approach, a bright smile spread across his face. When Ellie reached the arch, Logan took her hand. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, taking in everything that had led them here, every fall, every step, every note that had brought them to this peaceful, sunlit place. The officiant's words were simple, mixed with humor and warmth, but it was their vows that held everyone still. "I used to think my story ended on stage," Ellie said, her voice trembling. "But it turns out that was just the opening act. You've given me a second chance. Not just love, but joy, purpose, family." Logan's voice was deep and steady. He stepped into our lives and created music where there was only silence. He didn't just teach Max to dance. He taught me to feel again. "I promise to always be by your side, whether we're soaring high or stumbling." Of course, there were tears. There were soft gasps and hands holding tight in the crowd. Then, when the officiant declared them husband and wife, the crowd burst into applause. But before Ellie and Logan could kiss, Max stepped forward, reaching out to Ellie. "May I have this dance?" he asked. Ellie knelt down slightly, beaming. "You may." The guitarist played a slow, sweet tune. Max carefully took Ellie's hand, placing his other hand gently in hers, and together they swayed under the arch in front of the guests, in front of the world. Then Logan joined them, one hand on Ellie's back, the other firmly on Max's shoulder. The three of them danced in a slow, perfect triangle. No choreography, no show, just movement, connection, love. The crowd watched quietly, tears flowing, smiles never fading. As the sun set, casting long golden rays across the field, the family moved away from the arch and onto the open grass. Ellie spun gently, Max walked with confidence, and Logan followed with the kind of ease that only comes from being fully present. They danced until the sky turned amber, until the stars began to twinkle to life, until all that was left were memories of movement, music, and moments no one could forget. Ellie looked up at Logan. Max nestled between them and whispered, "We did it," and Logan smiled, kissing her forehead. Together, in the final frame of the evening, as the sky shifted to lavender and the field grew quiet, the three of them danced under the vast open sky, hand in hand, heart to heart, dancing under the vast open sky, hand in, not a solo, not a dream, a life, a dance, a love, forever. As the final notes of their dance faded into the dusk, we're reminded that healing doesn't always come with grand victories, but often in quiet moments, gentle hands, and the courage to take one more step. Ellie, Logan, and Max have shown us that family isn't just what we're born into. Sometimes it's something we build step by step, breath by breath, and heartbeat by heartbeat. This story reminds us that healing doesn't always come from doctors or miracles. It often begins with simple acts of presence and compassion. In a quiet diner, a young boy found connection not through speech, but through shared silence and the gentle rhythm of a waitress's kindness. And a father, once lost in his own grief and guilt, discovered hope not in grand gestures, but in witnessing his son finally smile. If this story touched you, consider showing your support for Ellie, the woman who chose to stay, to see beyond disability, and to believe in moments that many would overlook. Her quiet strength, her willingness to dance with someone the world had forgotten, speaks louder than words ever could. Logan still has a journey ahead, a journey of learning how to trust, how to let someone in, and how to build a life where love isn't feared, but welcomed. What do you think his next step should be? If you believe in stories like this, stories that warm the soul and make us pause, subscribe to Touching Tales Hub. One click, and you become part of a community that celebrates humanity, kindness, and second chances.